Hello, friends. I hope you're doing really well today. And I've been watching the interactions that I've had personally, or that my supervisees have had personally with clients. I guess the last 3 to 6 months. I mean, I'm always kind of doing this, but like very intentionally from a polyvagal attachment parts perspective. The typical things that we would seek supervision for, I've been really looking at through that lens. And so I thought I would do a series of those. I don't really have it planned. It's just kind of what seems showing up in the moment. I'm just going to share with you all. And in today's video, I want to share about a really typical question that we talk about in supervision, which is, do I share my story? Do I share any parts of my story that, wow, and that I feel like a lot of my clients struggle with, or that we have in common, and should I share that? And so, for me, coming from my view of this work is that the relationship is probably 80% of what creates healing, because eating disorders happen in a relationship. Chronic dieting happens in fear of being left out and not belonging in a relationship, and so of course it would make sense that healing would happen in relationships. So that's always kind of like my orientation to the work we do. But I also know that we have to bring our science hats to the table. We have to bring our sometimes our leadership to the table, because if our clients are too chaotic, or they're so dysregulated that they don't even know what they need. We have to kind of do some not totally taking over. I've had occasions where we've had to take over, and not so much around the food, but sometimes like, this is what needs to happen, and this time frame, otherwise big trouble kind of stuff, or consequences, not from me but just medically. So I think it's just really important to recognize that stuff does happen, but for the most part we can work with what's in the room. And so I'm coming back around here. We're just saying, but for the most part, the decision to yes or no say something has more to do with what's happening in the room. So let's say I have permission to share this story. So I have a supervisee who has her own lived experience of full recovery, and also in her journey, she also had a child who went through some disordered eating as well, and she's had to live all the sides, like being a client, being trained in this work, having to apply this work in a very personal way where it's like hard and chaotic and messy and frustrating, and she's had to live all the angles, unfortunately. But obviously this has given her and they've had to go on to have a good a good story as well with that. And so the question was, well, I have this mother who is struggling with just like, holding the line and staying on track, and do I share our family story, because I think she may have already shared her own recovery, and I think that was encouraging. That's one of the reasons they chose us to work with their family, is that pretty much everybody on our team has a lived experience story, and they're all different, but they've had to surrender, they've had to let go, they've had to fight, and we know what that feels like. But anyway, my advice, honestly, after we did some detailed inquiry, is, well, what parts of you are feeling like what's showing up in the room is open to that, and how would you know? All right, so that's the inquiry. And what part of you wants to share? Well, I understand the frustration. I understand, like, oh, this feels like it's never going to end. The doubts, all the things. I'm like, okay, and that's coming from what? That's coming from my, like, I think it's two things. And we kept inquiring. There were two parts to this. Part of it is I want to, give them some hope, and that's appropriate. Another part of me is like, well, maybe like mom will get on board a little sooner with wanting to do her own work if I share that that was part of what was necessary for this. And then well, let's hold that part right there, because that is in us. Is there another way we can like let people go to have their own journey and maybe this mother will choose not to do her own work, and her frustration has to last longer, and her dysregulation, she has to maybe stay in some degree of fight or flight longer than is necessary, that we see as necessary, but maybe it's necessary for her. And we're not going to know that until time shows, right? And so she could hear that. And then what would happen in the parts of this mom, not the teenager with eating disorder, but the mom, what would happen from what you know about the mom in her parts if you were to share that? And she's like, well, I think maybe part of her would feel, would really be able, maybe be able to align and maybe bond with me more. But there's also a pretty loud part that shows up a lot right now in the work that's very judgmental about the process. That it's too much. It's too much. It's like she's responsible for too much, and it takes too much time. And why can't this kid just get it together? And there's an angry part. That's it's not like it's incongruent totally. The mom's tired and frustrated, but that part needs to be worked with. It's like you're allowed to have that, and that part really has to have a place to speak and to go, so that doesn't continuously come into the meals. And that's what's happening, which is what is keeping all this dysregulation going. If mom would work with the part of her that thinks that she shouldn't have to have any discomfort, because really if mom doesn't face her discomfort, it keeps her in denial that honestly she's part of this, because mom also has an eating disorder. So it's really messy. You can see how messy these things get, right? And I'm sharing this video just as a way of like, if you are considering sharing parts of your story, all of your story, really get clear about what parts and how would their parts receive that. And it has to be done. Basically, the bottom line is this has to be done in right timing. This has to be done in regulation. So if there's regulation on board in that moment, and the person you're in front of is relatively unblended and regulated enough, then maybe these stories could land better, and it brings some confidence and some humanity to the room, which would be great, and that would bring more regulation and maybe more trust. But if done in wrong timing, and you just say something, I've done this before too in my earlier years, where I shared something that was actually content-wise very appropriate for the moment. It just didn't land though. They couldn't hear it because there was like too much guardedness, too much blending. There wasn't any opening yet really for that level of intimacy and connection. Too much guardedness, too much protection from the managers and all that. So anyway, these are messy scenarios. Sometimes we learn, just because we give it a shot and it doesn't land, and typically no harm. If there, is something that didn't land right, hopefully they have the ability to come and talk to you like, I really didn't really feel like that self-disclosure was that helpful to me. In that moment, hopefully your clients have the courage to do that. Typically what happens, though, unfortunately, is that they just don't come again, or it gets weird in the sessions, and you're just kind of trying to mind read what's going on because they won't tell you. Even if you say, like, I'm noticing you're kind of feeling more distant, and maybe they'll tell you, maybe they won't. Oftentimes, maybe if you get the luxury, if they'll tell their therapist, and the therapist is a really good team player, and they'll say, hey, this kind of happened, and they didn't feel like it really landed for them, and then you could get some maybe feedback and make some repair to the client and why you shared that, and but clearly you had a miss in your maybe you didn't ask for consent, can you share, basically, and get a better feel on it. So I hope this all helps you. I want to share more of these kind of stories of going back to like all the things we typically do supervision around, and then taking this parts polyvagal attachment lens to it. You might find that like why you want to share makes sense, and makes sense in your system, and when or how it might be appropriate to proceed with these things. Or maybe it's like, what, they need XYZ, but for example, I had to do a scenario this morning. For me, it's like session 2, I knew this person definitely needed a meal plan. They weren't going to be able to, like, they had too much dysregulation. There was not enough installation of a normative eating from their childhood to be able to pull on that resource of, oh, that's right, my grandma or my mom used to do this at lunch, and I remember that, and I think I could handle that. That feels safe enough. You know, this person just didn't have that. They've been put on diets or dieting with their family since they were 5th grade, probably. So there's just not a lot of strong neurobiology there of what normative eating used to be like. There's no good old days to fall back on, essentially. And so we're kind of having to start from scratch. So I knew that. But first session, they were just very scared to be there with me, and it was going to be too much. And there was a lot of education there to be done, and medically they were fine. Okay? They just, not that they weren't malnourished, they are, but I had some time. Second session, like, oh, this kid, she's a younger woman. She really needs a meal plan, but too afraid of carbs, too afraid of sugar. Got to work on that first, even though I'm thinking, oh, she really needs a meal plan. Session 5 this morning, we finally got to do it because she had settled enough into the reality because we've broken down a lot. So oftentimes we think, hurry up and do that meal plan. And typically I would do a meal plan in session, like an official one in session 2 if somebody needed it. But she needed an opportunity to see that her beliefs were incongruent. Her diet beliefs were incongruent with her values. And it was really hurting her life. And she just couldn't see it because she was so in it. She was ready today. And it went really easily, really smoothly, really on board with it. Scared, but willing. And that felt like the sweet spot to do it. Because there were also some times where she did eat. If there were 7 days of the week, I could also buy myself some time. There were 7 days, but 4, maybe she was eating a decent amount. Still not 100% probably what she needed, but 80, 90%. She did okay. So the other days that were more like 75, they're not ideal, but she was seeing a stronger urge to eat these other days, and she could make some meaning of that. Oh, my low days cause my more eating days. I'm not really binging. Once she could start to see that from an embodied experience, she was good to go, and session 5 was it. So anyway, that's another way of sharing, like, when do I do a meal plan? Well, sometimes you have to do it immediately. Sometimes you can buy yourself some time. Look at the attachment system, look at the beliefs, look at the neurobiology of threat. And I didn't have to force this meal plan. It was so great. And then my past dietitian early training, that's okay. I mean, I knew that this person needed to be, all these people need to be refed and have some stabilization as soon as possible. But I used to force it, maybe sooner than I had to. Maybe I could wait one more week. And, now just because of practice and the nuance of all this work, you can see like, I had to work with do some parts work first before it's like full on, let's go. And I do think that overall, there's going to be less whack-a-mole because of the approach I took. So here's some different examples. So we had 2 examples today in this teaching video. I hope it helped you. If you have any comments, if you have like a supervision question like this, I'd be happy to answer it. I'll probably do these Q&As once or twice a month. So put them here, email me, and I'll be happy to kind of collect a couple of those and do 2 at a time. And I won't overboard you guys with education materials, but I do want you, really, really, because this is this is all about not just trauma informed, but those of you who want to go deeper with training, we do our training. We're going to do our 12-week class, or I'm the 12-module class. More like it's honestly about 6 months. Of every other week sessions, but we'll start that again in September, the 13th actually. If you want to get a deep dive each training session around using these skills and really going into the weeds of it so you understand not just how to do things, but what you're seeing in the room and what makes sense to work with in that moment. So really being a good assessor of the situation, then you won't need to constantly question yourself, constantly take trainings, like seek out advice. And again, don't ever stop doing supervision. I don't stop doing supervision either, no matter how much I think I know. I keep going because there are totally circumstances that I don't know. I have lived experiences that might match somebody else's, but they might need a different intervention in their system to make it work, you know? So that's what we're here for, is to be present, be creative, and, you know, lead with truth, lead with passion, lead with love. So thank you all so much for watching, and curiosity there too. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, let me know about it. If this is the direction that you could use some support in. If you need something else, please put below, because I can't read minds what would be most beneficial for you in your learning. So thanks so much, and take care. Bye.